My name is Avery Calder, 34 years old. Cassie knocked at 9:10 a.m., 2 doors down, and trembling, like the cold had climbed inside her bones. She always waved when we passed on morning walks, asked about my hydrangeas, borrowed nutmeg once at Christmas, suburban friendly. But today, her mascara was a dark tide under red eyes, her ponytail crooked, a purpling bruise blooming at her collarbone where her shirt wouldn't quite hide it. There was dried blood caked under 3 fingernails, as if she'd clawed at a door. "Please," she said, voice splintering. "I need someone to watch Brayden and Zoe just for a few hours. My ex is threatening to take them, and I have to meet my lawyer." I opened the door without thinking. "Come in. Are you okay? Do you need me to drive you? Should we call the police?" "No, no," she said too quickly. "I have a car. They're good kids. Brayden knows the rules, and Zoe will nap most of the time." Her gaze kept skipping past me toward the street, like she expected it to open its mouth and swallow her. She pressed $200 into my hand, crisp bills, trembling fingers. "This covers everything. Food, activities, whatever they need. I should be back by 3. If I'm not back by 5, call this number." She handed over a crumpled slip of paper with digits scrawled like they'd been written in a moving car. "What kind of number is this?" "Someone who can help," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Promise me you'll call." Something in me bristled. The overpayment, the bruise, the blood, the way she flinched at each passing engine. But judgment was a luxury single mothers couldn't often afford in our neighborhood. "I'll keep them safe," I said. Her kids were angels in the first hour. 6-year-old Brayden colored quietly at my kitchen table, tongue caught between his teeth with concentration. 4-year-old Zoe curled on my couch and surrendered to sleep as if exhaustion had been stalking her. "You like school?" I asked while I made coffee. He nodded, careful. "Mommy says I'm good at reading." At 11:30, I grilled cheese, cut diagonals, because triangles make better magic, and slid a sandwich onto a plate bright with cartoon bears. Brayden ate in small, tidy bites, eyes flicking to the window every time a car hissed past. "Everything okay, sweetie?" "Mommy said not to go outside today," he answered, matter of fact. "She said to stay away from the windows, too, and if any strangers come, we should hide in the bathroom and be very, very quiet." The line of my spine went cold. Custody disputes didn't usually come with evacuation drills. I suggested Candyland in the back room, away from the front glass, and that's when I saw it. A small round scar on his wrist, shiny and pale, like old fire. "What happened there?" "Uncle Damien was angry that day," he said, and shrugged like kids do when they've learned the world doesn't slow down for their pain. Even in sleep, Zoe flinched when a truck downshifted outside. At noon, a black sedan slid into my driveway and parked too clean, too straight. 2 men in tailored suits climbed out with the choreography of people who'd rehearsed this, eyes sweeping corners, shoulders angled to cover each other's blind spots, one hand lingering inside a jacket. They didn't move like lawyers. They moved like problem solvers who preferred permanent solutions. The doorbell chimed. I cracked the door on the chain. The taller one smiled without involving his eyes. "We're looking for Cassie Martinez," he said. "Her children are supposed to come with us." "I'm sorry," I replied, easing the door closed. "I can't help you." A polished shoe shot forward, blocking the door. The smile died. "Ma'am, we have custody papers. The children need to come with us now." That's when I saw the bulge under his jacket, the faint print of a holster pressing the fabric. Brayden appeared at my side like a small ghost, fingers knotting my shirt. "Those aren't the good guys," he whispered, voice sealed in terror. My blood iced over. I shoved the door with my shoulder, slammed the deadbolt, and backed away. Through the frosted glass, their silhouettes shifted. The second man circled the porch, his head tilted as if listening through walls. "Brayden," I said, keeping my voice even, "wake Zoe. Both of you go upstairs to my bathroom. Close the door. Turn on the fan. Don't make a sound." He ran, more soldier than child, the kind of practice fear that made my throat burn. I grabbed my phone with slick hands and dialed 911. "There are men trying to take 2 children," I whispered. "I think they're armed. They're not police." "Are you in immediate danger?" the operator asked, voice steady as a metronome. "Yes, they're surrounding the house. Officers are on their way. Get to a secure location. Stay on the line." Through the kitchen window, I watched the stockier man cut across my lawn toward the back. He spoke into a radio, Spanish quick and clipped. I caught enough, respaldo, perimetro. Then, flat in English, package, delivery schedule. My house had abruptly become inventory. I slid the chain onto the back door and dragged a chair under the knob. The handle jiggled, polite as a test. A second later, wood splintered with a sickening crack. Upstairs, I breathed to myself, heart ricocheting in my ribs. I took the steps 2 at a time, found the kids pressed into my bathroom, locked that door too. The fan hummed. It sounded like a prayer. Are the police coming? Braden asked, tucking Zoe under his arm like he'd had to be a shield before. Yes, I said, because children deserve yeses. They're close. Footsteps shook the hallway. Unhurried now, drawers yanked open just to hear them slam, my life tossed like it didn't matter. We know you're here, a voice called, friendly as a snake. Just give us the kids and nobody gets hurt. We don't want you. This isn't your fight. The doorknob jerked. The first kick cracked the frame. Zoe whimpered, and I covered her mouth gently. Braden's grip on my sleeve turned his knuckles white. Second kick, splinters leapt. Light spilled through a seam that hadn't been there a heartbeat ago. I looked at the window. Small, stubborn, maybe enough. Braden, I whispered, can you fit through that window? You'll help Zoe down to the porch roof and then to Mrs. Patterson's yard. Run to her and tell her to call the police again. What about you? I'm right behind you, I lied, because lies can be blankets when the house is on fire. He nodded like a man taking orders he didn't like and climbed. I boosted Zoe after him and felt her little shoes vanish into the light. The door exploded inward on the third kick. The taller man filled the frame, gun drawn, a pale scar running from his ear to his jaw like a signature he couldn't scrub off. His eyes were empty of anything I wanted to recognize. Where are they? He asked. Gone, I said, and for once the truth was a weapon I got to keep. He cursed in Spanish, raised the radio. Subjects fled. Check perimeter. Neighbor's yard. Then he stepped in, the muzzle following his breath. You just made this harder on yourself, he said, closing the distance. From somewhere down the block, sirens began to rise, thin threads at first, then ropes, then a tide. His expression changed. Predators hate crowds. He grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the hall, fingers biting hard enough to bruise. From downstairs, another voice. 2 minutes out. Footfalls doubled, then tripled. The house listened with me. I planted my feet and sucked a breath like I was about to dive. The hallway narrowed to the width of a choice. The fan hummed, the window gaped, the sirens climbed, and the door's busted frame creaked as if the house itself was bracing. The next move would decide everything. The house had gone still, too still. The kind of silence that comes right before a storm or a scream. The scar-jawed man's grip bruised my arm as he yanked me toward the hallway. My bare feet slid on the hardwood, and I could smell his cologne, something synthetic that tried and failed to mask the sweat of adrenaline. You're coming with us, he hissed. Like hell I am, I snapped, twisting. My elbow slammed into his ribs. He grunted, loosening his hold just long enough for me to tear free. I ran. The sound of heavy boots pounded behind me, the thud of pursuit echoing through the hall. The house had become a map of danger. Stairs to my left, narrow corridor ahead, open window too far to reach. Every instinct screamed at me to keep moving. At the top of the stairs, I caught a glimpse of the second man, the stocky one, rushing up from below, blocking my escape. His tattooed forearms flexed as he raised his weapon. Don't move, he growled. The sirens outside grew louder now, closer. Red and blue lights flickered against the front windows like ghostly warnings. We need to go, he shouted to his partner. Cops are seconds out. Not without the package, the scarred man barked back. Package. I realized they weren't talking about me. They meant Braden and Zoe. They talked about those kids like they were objects to be delivered. And that thought, the casual cruelty of it, ignited something primal in me. I spun, grabbed the banister, and vaulted over the railing. For a heartbeat, I was weightless. Then gravity tore me down into the living room. I landed hard, pain flaring through my ankle, but I was alive. Freeze! A voice roared from outside as the front door burst open. Police, drop your weapons! The next seconds blurred into chaos. Shouting, the crash of shattered glass, a gunshot that split the air. My hearing rang with white noise. I crawled behind the couch, heart hammering so violently I could feel it in my throat. When the world snapped back into focus, the taller man was face down on the floor, a spreading bloom of blood darkening his sleeve. The stocky one had been tackled by 2 officers near the kitchen. His gun skittered across the tiles before someone kicked it away. I stayed frozen, clutching the edge of the couch like it could keep me anchored. An officer's voice broke through the static. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" I think I'm okay. "Stay where you are. EMTs are on the way." Through the broken window, I saw Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor, standing on her porch with a hand over her mouth, the phone still clutched in her other hand. 2 children were wrapped in blankets beside her. "Braden and Zoe." My chest loosened. They were safe. By the time the paramedics reached me, the living room was a crime scene. Splintered door frame, glass everywhere, furniture overturned like a storm had ripped through. A medic shone a light in my eyes, checked my pulse, asked questions I barely heard. Outside, the night was alive with police lights and murmurs. Reporters were already gathering behind the yellow tape, camera flashes cutting through the drizzle. "Ms. Calder?" I turned to see a woman approaching, her badge catching the glow of a cruiser's headlights. She was young, maybe early 30s, auburn hair pulled into a tight ponytail. Her eyes were sharp but kind. "Detective Walsh," she introduced herself. "You've had quite a night." That's one way to put it. She sat beside me on the porch steps where the paramedics had left me wrapped in a gray blanket. "You did the right thing calling 911, she said. "You probably saved those kids' lives." "Who were they?" I asked, voice hoarse. "They said they had custody papers. They knew Cassie's full name." Walsh glanced toward the ambulance where officers were securing the suspects. "Cassie Martinez," she said slowly, flipping through her notepad. "Real name, Carolina Vega." My head lifted. "What?" "She's not who you thought. She's the sister-in-law of a man named Damon Vega, big-time drug trafficker. We've been after him for years. Carolina used to work for one of his shell companies. When she found out what it really was, she went to the feds." I blinked at her. "She's a witness?" Walsh nodded grimly. "Key witness. She was supposed to testify next week. Those men were sent to grab her kids, to use them as leverage so she'd stay quiet." The words hit me harder than the fall had. I looked back toward Mrs. Patterson's porch, where Braden clung to Zoe like a guardian angel in training. Their small faces glowed pale under the streetlight. "They're just children," I whispered. "I know," Walsh said softly. "That's why this case has half the department on edge. When it comes to organized crime, family is the first weapon they use." My mind replayed every moment. The way Cassie had checked over her shoulder, the fear in her voice, Braden's scar, the rules about windows. None of it had been paranoia. It had been preparation. Walsh stood. "I'll need you to come in tomorrow to give a full statement. We'll have an officer outside your house until then. Just in case." "Just in case what?" She hesitated. "People like Damon Vega don't take failure well." I stared at the cracked doorway where the splintered wood still smelled of gunpowder. "And the kids?" "They'll go into federal protective custody with their mother. New names, new lives." I wanted to feel relief. Instead, I felt hollow. What happens to me? Walsh exhaled through her nose. "You just became part of a federal case, Ms. Calder." The words sounded clinical, but the weight of them was anything but. When the police finally cleared the scene, I sat in my living room surrounded by chaos, the air thick with the ghost of what could have happened. I looked at the shattered glass, the dented wall, the dark streak of blood by the stair rail. My hands shook uncontrollably. Through the open window, I could still hear the echo of Braden's voice. Small, certain, unforgettable. Those aren't the good guys. He was right. And something deep inside me knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The morning after the attack, my house looked like it had been through a war. Police tape fluttered across the porch, a yellow wound against the gray sky. Every doorway was splintered, every surface dusted with the chalk of chaos. I kept thinking if I cleaned fast enough, I could erase the fear too. But fear doesn't come off with soap and water. Detective Walsh came by at 9. She carried 2 coffees and that look seasoned cops have. Tired, kind, cautious. "We processed the scene overnight," she said, stepping around the shattered picture frames. "You're lucky, Avery. Most people caught in this kind of crossfire don't walk away." "Lucky," I repeated, staring at the bullet hole in my wall. "That's one word for it." She took a sip of her coffee before continuing. "The 2 men you encountered are talking. They're low-level muscle in Damon Vega's operation. He runs a heroin distribution network across 3 states, millions in revenue each month. Carolina Vega, your Cassie, wasn't just his sister-in-law. She was his bookkeeper. She found out her numbers weren't for real estate transactions. They were laundering drug money." I leaned against the counter, trying to anchor myself. "So she ran." "Exactly. Took her kids, went to the feds 6 months ago, started cooperating." She's the centerpiece of a federal case that could dismantle his empire. Walsh hesitated. You just happen to live on the safest-looking street between her and her next relocation point. I let out a bitter laugh. Lucky again. For the next week, my home became a revolving door of investigators. FBI agents in dark suits cataloged evidence, while local officers guarded the perimeter. Neighbors whispered over fences. Mrs. Patterson brought casseroles and guilt in equal measure. You're a hero, she told me, pressing my hand. You saved those children. Hero. The word didn't fit. Heroes sleep at night. I hadn't slept in days. When the house was finally cleared, the quiet felt worse than the chaos. Every creak of the floor made me think someone had returned. Every engine outside made my pulse spike. That's when the threats began. The first was a voicemail, a man's voice, smooth but sharp. Should have minded your own business. The second was a photo in my mailbox, me walking to work, unaware, a red circle drawn around my face. The third was a note. You like playing protector? Let's see who protects you. I forwarded everything to Walsh. Within hours, 2 unmarked cars parked on my street. Temporary, she assured me. They just want to scare you. They'll move on once they realize you're under our watch. But I wasn't sure I believed that. 3 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Avery? The voice cracked, but I recognized it instantly. Cassie. No, Carolina. She was crying so hard I could barely make out the words. I'm so sorry. I never meant to put you in danger. Are you okay? Are the kids? They're safe, I said quickly. They're with you, right? Yes. The FBI has us in a secure location. The prosecutor says my testimony will put Damon away for life. Good, I said, but my voice came out flat. You should have told me the truth. I couldn't, she whispered. Every person who knew where we were ended up dead or missing. I didn't think they'd find us here. I thought we had more time. Her guilt was real, but it didn't soothe me. I looked around at my boarded-up windows and shattered sense of safety. You were wrong, I said quietly. They did find you, through me. Silence stretched between us. Then, softly, thank you for protecting them, for believing me, even when you didn't know why. I hung up before the tears came. Over the next month, I learned more about Damon Vega than I ever wanted to. Walsh kept me updated. He's cunning, she said. He uses family loyalty as currency. Carolina's testimony is going to burn his whole network. But loyalty cuts both ways. 2 weeks before the trial, another letter appeared. No envelope this time, just folded paper taped to my door. We don't forget, you can't hide behind badges forever. I stopped opening my blinds. I changed my route to work every day. I checked under my car before getting in. Sleep became a stranger. One night around 2 a.m., I sat on the edge of my bed, gripping the baseball bat Detective Walsh had given me, just in case. The air hummed with phantom footsteps. Every sound became a threat. That was when the fear twisted into something else, not panic, but purpose. If Damon Vega wanted to silence witnesses, I would be louder. I contacted the district attorney's office and agreed to testify about the night of the attack, the break-in, the threats, everything. Walsh raised an eyebrow when I told her. You sure? The feds can protect you, but once your name's in the courtroom, it's out there. I'm sure, I said. If I run, he wins. I won't spend my life hiding from his ghosts. She gave a slow, proud nod. Then you're stronger than most people I know. A week later, a plain envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was a single postcard, a photo of a beach at sunset. On the back, in messy handwriting. Starting over. The kids say hi. Thank you for everything. C. I read it 3 times before I let myself breathe. The ink smudged under my fingers from tears I hadn't realized were there. I pinned the postcard to my refrigerator, a small, fragile reminder that despite everything, broken doors, sleepless nights, faceless threats, some good had survived. But as I looked at the picture of that beach, I couldn't shake the feeling that calm seas never last long. The trial was coming, and with it, the storm. The courthouse smelled like rain and nerves. I remember standing in the marble hallway, hands damp despite the chill, watching reporters press against the barricades outside. Flashbulbs flared every few seconds like lightning trapped indoors. The trial of Damon Vega had become a spectacle. Headlines, cameras, whispered theories about cartel connections. To them, it was a story. To me, it was what had stolen my peace. When they called my name to the stand, the room went very still. I kept my eyes on the prosecutor, not the defense table, as I swore to tell the truth. My voice wavered only once. When I had to describe the moment, Braden whispered, "Those aren't the good guys." I spoke about the door slamming, the gun, the children, the fear so thick you could taste it in the air. I described how the taller man had blocked the hallway and how the stockier one had circled behind the house, how they'd used the words package and delivery like the kids were boxes to be shipped off. When I finally looked toward the defense table, Damon Vega was staring right at me. Expensive suit, polished watch, perfectly composed. His eyes were a shade of gray that might have been charming if they weren't so utterly empty. But when I said Braden's name, something flickered behind that calm mask, something like recognition or irritation at being remembered by a child he thought of as disposable. It was gone in a second, but I saw it. The prosecutor noticed too. "Did you see that?" he murmured later in the hallway. "You got under his skin. That's rare." Carolina's testimony began the next day. 3 full days on the stand. She was unflinching, walking the jury through financial records, shell companies, coded emails, transaction logs, all evidence she'd gathered while pretending to still be loyal. The defense tried everything, painting her as vengeful, unstable, greedy. But the documents didn't lie. Every time she spoke, another thread of Damon's empire unraveled. Walsh sat beside me in the gallery. "If she survives this," she whispered, "she'll change federal case law. Women like her usually don't make it to court alive." I looked at Carolina, tired but determined, and felt something like pride. She wasn't running anymore. Neither was I. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they filed back in, you could feel the weight of what they carried. The foreman stood, voice steady, guilty on all counts. A murmur rippled through the room. Damon didn't flinch. He simply straightened his tie, leaned toward his lawyer, and smiled. A thin, deliberate smile that promised nothing was truly over. That smile haunted me. Because in stories, villains get dragged away and the screen fades to black. But in real life, they leave echoes behind. People, favors, debts. The threats resumed within a week. A letter slid under my door. "You took him from us. We'll take you back." A voicemail left at work. A man breathing for 30 seconds, then whispering my name. One night, I came home to find the back door cracked open. Nothing stolen. Just drawers rifled through, photographs overturned. Walsh arranged for extra patrols and installed motion lights, but the message was clear. "We can reach you whenever we want." That was when the U.S. Marshals came with paperwork, witness protection relocation. They offered me a new name, a new city, a clean slate. "You'd disappear," one agent said. "Start over somewhere safe." I stared at the form. A new identity meant abandoning everything. My house, my garden, the library job I loved. It meant erasing who I'd been. That night, I walked through my quiet house. The repaired doors still bore faint cracks like scars that would never quite fade. My grandmother's teacups glimmered on the shelf. The postcard from Carolina's kids fluttered slightly in the air conditioning. Could I really walk away from all this because of a man already behind bars? When Walsh came by the next morning, she saw the unsigned paperwork on my counter. "You're not taking the offer," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "If I run, he wins. I won't give him that." She studied me, weighing something invisible. "Then promise me you'll let us help. Security system, safe routes, regular check-ins." "I promise." She nodded, but her expression held both admiration and worry. "Most people don't have your kind of spine, Avery." "It's not spine," I said. "It's stubbornness dressed up as courage." She smiled faintly. "That's usually enough." I decided if Damon Vega could build an empire on fear, I'd build something on defiance. I joined a nonprofit that supported witnesses of violent crime, people like me who couldn't sleep, who checked locks twice, who flinched at shadows. I started speaking at community meetings, teaching others how to recognize intimidation tactics, how to document threats, how to survive being afraid. Every time I stood behind a microphone, my hands still shook. But I kept doing it anyway, because silence was his language, and I refused to speak it ever again. 8 months passed after the verdict, and life settled into something that only looked like normal. People at work smiled at me again, but their eyes lingered, curious and cautious. The neighborhood went back to its rhythm. Sprinklers, mailboxes, evening jogs, as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. Fear has a long half-life. Some nights I'd wake to the hum of the fridge and still reach for the baseball bat beside my bed, heart pounding like a held breath. I kept my windows locked, curtains drawn, lights on timers, Every sound became a question. Every silence became an answer I didn't like. Then one evening I came home to find the back door slightly ajar. The wood around the latch was splintered, the kind of careful break that said whoever did it wanted me to know they'd been inside. Nothing was stolen, not a thing. My jewelry, my laptop, my wallet, all untouched. They hadn't come for things. They'd come for message. The police arrived within minutes. Walsh stood in my kitchen, studying the doorframe with a grim expression. "They didn't force it too hard," she said. "No fingerprints, no shoe impressions. Professionals." "Meaning?" I asked. "Meaning they wanted you to feel unsafe. Not dead, not yet." The calmness of her tone made my stomach twist. "So this is psychological warfare now?" "It's always been," she said quietly. "Men like Vega build their power on fear that never ends." 2 weeks later, I got a call while watering my garden. Walsh's voice was tight. "Avery, I need you to sit down." The words froze me in place. What happened? "Damon Vega's dead." For a second, I didn't process it. What? Prison fight. He picked a fight with someone who wasn't scared of him. His protection network inside couldn't save him. She paused. "It's over, Avery. Truly over." The watering can slipped from my hand. Water splashed over the dirt like rain, darkening the ground. "You're sure?" "Yes, the Bureau confirmed it an hour ago." I didn't cry. I did not cheer. I just stood there in my yard as a breeze brushed through the hydrangeas, carrying a silence that felt like release. For the first time in years, I let my shoulders drop and realized how heavy I'd been carrying myself. That night, I slept for 8 hours straight. No nightmares, no phantom footsteps, just quiet. When I woke, the light slanted across the walls, soft and golden. For the first time, my house didn't feel like a bunker. It felt like home again. Still, relief came braided with guilt, because peace won by death never feels clean. Walsh stopped by later that week. She leaned against my porch railing, sipping coffee from a travel mug. "You did everything right, Avery. You survived. You helped take down a monster." "Monsters don't die," I said. "They just stop breathing." She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but sometimes that's enough." We watched the street for a while. Kids rode bikes past the curb, their laughter cutting through the air. It sounded like healing. In the months that followed, I rebuilt what fear had eaten. I replanted my garden, joined a book club, and volunteered at the victim advocacy nonprofit every Saturday. I spoke at schools, community centers, and police trainings about what happens after the headlines fade. I told them the truth. Survival isn't a single victory. It's a daily act of choosing life, even when fear wants you to shrink. One afternoon after a speech, a young woman came up to me. She'd been through a domestic violence case, still shaking when she talked about testifying. "How did you keep going when you were scared?" she asked. "I didn't stop being scared," I told her. "I just stopped letting fear drive." She nodded, tears brimming, and I realized then that maybe my story wasn't just something awful that happened to me. Maybe it was a lantern for someone else. A few months later, I received another postcard. No return address, just a picture of a sunrise over the ocean. The handwriting was familiar, messy, earnest. "Package delivered safely. We're free. Thank you for everything. C." Underneath was a drawing in blue crayon, 2 stick figures holding hands, a taller one standing between them. Above it, written in shaky block letters, "Avery, the hero." I laughed through the tears. I pinned it beside the first postcard on my fridge. This one wasn't just a thank you. It was proof that some cycles really can break. One morning, months later, I stepped into my yard to find sunlight catching on the repaired door frames, gleaming faintly like scars that had learned to shine. The air smelled of soil and fresh-cut grass. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Not for me this time. I breathed in and whispered to the quiet world around me. It's over. And for the first time, I truly believed it. 4 years after that terrible Tuesday, I got the call I didn't know I'd been waiting for. "Avery," the voice said, trembling through a bad connection. "We're free." It was Carolina. I hadn't heard her voice in years, but I'd recognize it anywhere. The breathless relief, the exhaustion, the disbelief that peace could finally be real. "Free?" I echoed. "New identities, new lives," she said. "But this time, no more hiding. Damon's network is gone. The kids are safe." I heard her crying, soft and unguarded. "You saved us, Avery. I mean it. You saved us." I pressed the phone to my chest, closed my eyes, and for the first time felt something close to forgiveness. Not for Damon, but for all the versions of me who'd lived afraid. We talked for an hour. She told me everything, how the FBI had relocated them to a small coastal town where no one knew their past, how she'd opened a coffee and book shop with sea green walls and a chalkboard menu written by Braden, how Zoe had started riding horses, fearless now, her laughter echoing across sand dunes. "They remember you," Carolina said. "Braden still has nightmares sometimes, but when he wakes up, he says, 'Avery wouldn't let the bad guys win.'" I smiled through tears. "Tell him I didn't." "I wish you could see them," she whispered. "Would you, maybe, someday?" "Someday," I promised. 6 months later, someday came. I drove 8 hours along the coast to a town so small it didn't appear on most maps. The directions led me to a beachside cafe with hand-painted signs and the smell of salt and espresso in the air. The windows were open to the sea, laughter spilling out like sunlight. Carolina met me outside. I barely recognized her, her shoulders no longer curved under invisible weight, her smile easy, her face years younger than when I'd last seen her. "You came," she said, hugging me tightly. "You asked," I said. "That's all it took." Then I saw them. Braden, taller now, with the same dark eyes but steadier hands, approached shyly before surprising me with a hug that nearly lifted me off my feet. Zoe, 8 now, rushed forward, curls bouncing. "You're real," she said, breathless. "Mom says you're our guardian angel." I laughed, kneeling to meet her eyes. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who got lucky enough to help." "Mom says that's what angels always say." Carolina laughed from behind her. "She's been saying that for years." That weekend felt like stepping into a photograph I didn't know I was missing. We walked on the beach, played mini golf, ate too much ice cream. I watched Braden race ahead of his mother, sand kicking up under his sneakers, his sister chasing him with shrieks of joy. It was ordinary, and that made it extraordinary. On our last evening, we sat on their back porch, watching the sunset bleed into the ocean. Braden leaned against the railing beside me, quiet for a long time. "I want to be a police officer," he said finally. I looked at him, surprised, but not really. "That's a big goal." "I want to protect families," he said, glancing at me. "Like you protected us." Emotion caught in my throat. "You'll make an incredible officer." He smiled. "Will you come to my graduation when I finish academy?" I put a hand on his shoulder. "Try and keep me away." 2 years later, a letter arrived. No return address, just like always. Inside was a photo. Braden in a police academy uniform, badge gleaming under sunlight. Zoe beside him, holding a horse's reins, both of them grinning wide enough to break hearts. The message was short. "Thank you for teaching us that good people fight for what's right. Love, B and Z." I pinned the photo next to their postcards. My refrigerator had become a timeline of survival, a family's rebirth mapped in magnets and hope. 5 more years passed. One autumn morning, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, I froze. A young man in his 20s stood there, tall, confident, wearing a crisp uniform. The badge on his chest gleamed. "Ms. Calder," he said, smiling. "I'm Braden." The world tilted a little. "You kept your promise." "I told you I would." He stepped inside, looking around the house like it was sacred ground. "It's smaller than I remember," he said softly, "but it feels the same." We sat for hours, talking about his training, his career, his mother's new life, Zoe's veterinary studies. He told me about the first case he worked, a missing child reunited with her mother. "I kept thinking about you," he said. "What you did that day, how you didn't run." "I was terrified," I admitted. "That's what makes it brave," he said. When he stood to leave, he hugged me. Not the timid embrace of a scared 6-year-old, but the strong, sure hug of a man who'd learned how to protect others. "You changed my life," he whispered. I smiled through tears. "No, Braden, you changed your own. I just stood in the doorway until you could." He laughed softly. Still sounds like something an angel would say. After he left, I sat on the porch as the sun dropped behind the trees, painting the sky the same shade of orange I'd seen that first night after the trial. The air was cool, the wind smelled faintly of hydrangeas and rain. I thought about ripples, the way one act of courage spreads outward, touching people you may never meet. Braden would protect families. Zoe would heal animals. Carolina would pour coffee for strangers who didn't know they were sitting inside a miracle. And me? I'd keep telling our story. Because sometimes the moment you realize you're in over your head isn't the moment you're drowning. It's the moment you're becoming. You learn that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about showing up anyway. It's about slamming a door on the dark and saying, "Not this time." And if I've learned anything, it's that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose courage over comfort, especially when they're scared. That day, I didn't just save 2 children. I discovered who I was meant to be. The cycle of fear broke that night, and in its place, something stronger took root, something that would keep rippling outward long after the lights faded and the sirens stopped. Because the truth is simple. You don't have to be fearless to be brave. You just have to care enough to act. And I did.